convinced that Das has still got slick tyres. I don't think he came in for wets.
Welcome everyone. This is going to be a race analysis of probably one of my toughest races last year, the Grand Prix of Pau in France. There are only 3 Grand Prix outside of Formula 1, and that is this Pau Grand Prix, the New Zealand Grand Prix, which I've had a chance to drive in, and the Macau Grand Prix. This is one of those races that took equal parts skill as it did to luck. The conditions were changing constantly. It was one of those times where it started raining right when we were on the grid, and we were all on slick tires. So some of us had the opportunity to switch to wets on the formation lap, but everyone where I was and in front of me decided to stay on slicks in hopes that the track would actually dry out and the rain would stop. It ended up working more in the favor of the people who pitted earliest, and that pretty much happened to be all the people who were starting towards the back of the field. But that's just how racing goes sometimes. And even though the result on paper doesn't look like that great of a result, this was actually one of the races I was most proud of last year. It was hard enough to survive, let alone to maintain the position that I did end up finishing in. So hope you guys enjoy this. Hope you enjoyed the analysis of it, because I think it's one thing to watch these races, but it's another thing to actually hear what went through my mind, unfiltered. So just before we start the race, let me just explain why a street course is a little bit different than any other racetrack. First of all, you're on obviously normal streets, and the compound of the actual pavement is very different from racetracks. Racetracks are super smooth, and normal streets, it's actually designed to drain water from the middle of the road. So all roads are crowned sort of in a triangular shape. And this makes it really difficult for a lot of corners because you want to maximize the line. So you want to come in from the outside of the corner, apex, at the apex, and then exit wide. So you have tons of banking right at the apex of the corner, but as you're approaching the corner, you have to go over that crown, over the hump, and then into the banking. And so that can make predicting where you're actually gonna, pick a turn-in point very difficult. And the same goes for the exit. You might have really good grip as you pick up the power, but once you reach that crown on the exit of the corner, then all of a sudden you have a negative camber, which, causes the rear to really be difficult to pick up. So you'll see probably in some of my lines, and this is even weirder because it's a wet race with slicks, but even just in dry conditions, the line ends up being a little bit different than you'd expect geometrically on a normal racetrack. So just keep that in mind as you're watching. The other thing is rubber. On a normal racetrack, there's always usually some rubber left over from whenever someone was last on it, but obviously in a street course, the only people driving on it before us were, street cars, which aren't pushing the limits enough to really put down any rubber, and usually it's pretty dirty just from being a city street. So at this point in the race week, and it's actually towards the end, the rubber buildup's been significant enough, but then as soon as water gets on it, it releases the oils from the rubber, and you end up having this greasy sensation. So what went from a very grippy track all of a sudden went to a very, very slippery track. Also unique to Pau over other street courses. Usually street courses, you kind of run all the way up to the wall. And the wall is what would be grass on a normal circuit or a curb on a normal circuit. In this case, you don't actually go straight up to the walls in most corners. You actually have a sidewalk that's painted so you can see it, and then the wall. So a lot of times it's very tricky to see because we're sitting so low in the car. It's kind of hard to see the sidewalks, but that has to be our measurement, not the actual wall itself. So you see in some places a bit more margin than you may expect, but that's purely out of trying to save the car, trying to save the tires, and trying not to crash into something. So with that being said, let's go ahead and watch the start of the race. Now as you're watching the start, keep in mind this is probably the driest part of the race, and it continues to rain throughout. So we're going to go ahead and watch the first lap of the race in its entirety, and then sort of throughout the race, because it is 35 minutes long, I'm going to skip through certain bits, and I'm going to highlight little areas where I feel like I can provide some sort of insight. So that was a pretty good start. Managed to pass 2 cars straight off the line purely by managing the traction a little bit better. So keep an eye on the actual front tires themselves. That'll give you a good indication of how wet it is. So now we're heading into turn 4, which is the hairpin on circuit. It's such a tight corner that we're actually not allowed to overtake for the first lap. And you'll see the little yellow line on the circuit. That's to tell us where not to go. So you can probably see that the car in front actually has better traction than I do off the line. And that's purely down to having better temperature in the tires at this point. But there's actually another technique that I ended up discovering because I ended up racing for that team later in the year. So now I'm heading into Casino Corner, this high-speed left-hander. You'll see I actually tapped the wall in the exit here. Luckily there was no damage and we kept going, but that was certainly certainly a scary moment. I'm not sure if it's coming across on camera, but it is actually fairly damp already at this point, even from just a little bit of rain. Here's a quick screenshot of what it looks like in the dry. Also, another thing to note, all these painted lines you see, like crosswalks or road indicators, stuff like that, is really, really slippery when it's wet. So you may be asking yourself, why haven't I pitted for wet to this point? And the reason is, at this point, I'm feeling like it's really not wet enough for me to justify taking 30 seconds, a minute, even longer for a tire change in the pit lane. And I don't think I'll be able to make that up. Also, at this point, it hasn't started raining heavily. I'm in the opinion at this moment that I could end up burning up wet tires if I go on them this early. They're much softer compound. They're treaded tires, so it's very easy for them to wear if it's at all dry. Already on lap 2, we have a safety car. This will allow us to bunch back up, and hopefully at this point maybe I have a bit more temp and can stay with the lead group. So if you didn't know, when we have a safety car, we all line up behind the actual safety car, and we line up in single file. We're allowed to weave, try and get some temperature in the tires, and then once the incident's cleared, safety car moves out of the way, and then we all race again. Obviously, everyone in front of me is still on slicks, and most people behind me at this point are on slicks as well.
As we get the Pau Grand Prix back underway, the drivers are at the final section of the lap, accelerating towards the last right-hander at turn 15. It looks like a good restart to me. 4 out of 4 motorpark cars in the top 4.
Again, I don't think it's coming across on camera, but it is proper raining at this point. In my mind, I'm really debating whether or not I should stay out on slicks. I could obviously pit. At this point, I got some better radio communication with my team, and they were adamant to stay out for as long as possible because Really, the best opportunity to switch to slicks was on the formation lap or very, very early on in the race. And everyone in front of me was still on slick, so we decided to stay on the strategy. So at this point, every other car has pretty much pitted for wets or will pit for wets in the next few laps. This is the first one that pitted. This is Billy Monger, who pitted on the formation lap. He ended up going on to win the race, and he managed to not cook the tires when it was at the dry part of the race, and it happened to be just the right time for when it started to rain. I was the only one who decided to stay out on slicks because the calculations that my engineer did actually made sense for staying out. You'll see later on in the race, it definitely was a viable strategy. Just have a look as we're coming out of the hairpin here, how much better the traction is on rain tires at this point. So now we're fast forwarding several minutes before the second car on wet tires overtakes me. That just goes to show how quick Billy was on the wet tires at this point, that really anyone else who had changed the wet tires around the time he did couldn't really keep up. So he definitely did a great job on wets.
For the race lead, he can give it a go. They're approaching the chicane where he made that stunning pass on Sonoda, and he is having a try. He launches down the inside, the teammates collide. The two motor park drivers off, and that was Billy Monger going past them into the lead of the Pau Grand Prix.
So this ended up being the pivotal moment of the race. The two leaders ended up crashing together, and then that triggered a safety car, which bunched up the entire field. I believe we were running P3 at this point, and we were the only car on slicks left, because I believe these two were the only other ones on slicks, and they obviously crashed. So it was just me at this point. That meant every single car who lines up behind me for the restart could be a lap down, but they're going to be on wet tires, and they're going to have an opportunity to overtake me fairly easily. So at this point, I don't really know what position I'm in, but I'm in complete damage control mode.
Sharp end with Billy Monger in front of Nikolai Kiergaard, and Cameron Dass will move up into third place. I'm just wondering how far down the order Yuki Tsunoda has dropped. The safety car is coming in.
So we're going to go ahead and watch the entire restart lap here. It was really exciting from my point of view because we had two guys in front of me who were on wets, who I knew I wasn't going to be able to keep up with, still being on slicks. And then we had everyone behind me also on wets. Some of them I knew were probably a lap down, but I really didn't know what position I was in. But that didn't mean I wasn't going to defend as much as I possibly could. Okay, what you're about to see is a classic case of being too eager for an overtake.
Yeah, and Yuki Tsunoda on his new wet tyres is looking very grippy.
Oh, and so is Lundqvist, though, immediately down the inside of Cameron Dass. It's awfully tight, though, and he's run out of room at the exit. It is a classic Lise fender bender. We've got three cars queued up. Linus Lundqvist.
So you saw just there that I actually had gone to the middle of the track to defend, but saw that he was really eager to go for the inside. So I decided to actually open up the corner a little bit and then allow him through, knowing full well that there's no way he was going to make the corner. And you'll see a lap later, that was the end of his race.
And they're approaching turn 6 now, and we're seeing 4 cars in our picture now. That's one of Teo Martin cars overtaking Cameron Dass as well. That's Lucas Dunner. So it's unusual for Dass because I believe he changed the tyres quite early in this race.
Yeah, I don't know if he's just lost the heat in them during the safety car period. Is he still on slicks? They certainly look very...
Maybe the tread's just gone slightly from the wet tyres because they've been ran for so long.
So this car just tried to pass me into turn 1, and one of the reasons why I actually always defend a little bit, even though I know these cars are going to inevitably overtake me, is because there is the small chance that they make a mistake and crash. And of course you don't really want your competitors to crash necessarily, but that is one position that I may not have to fight for later on the race if he decides to go off into a wall.
Still They're separated by a few tenths, and they're running at a reasonable pace compared to the rest of the pack. Oh, and there's
Cameron Dass continuing to struggle.
Yeah.
I think he's lost another place there to Christian
He's going
Hahn.
to lose another now.
Really,
Callum
really.
Williams. Because he was a lot further down the order. That's his Fortec Motorsports teammate.
I'm convinced that Dass has still got slick tyres, and I don't think he came in for wets.
And Das is indeed on slicks, we've just got confirmation of.
So that's it for this video. I just want to say thank you to everyone who helped organize this Pau Grand Prix, to all the marshals, to my competitors, and to the Fortec team who I was racing with at the time. I really had a blast. I want to thank the fans that actually attended as well. Also, thank you to the Americans who were always standing in the hairpin, waving the flag every time I went around that corner. And that was always a good boost of inspiration in the races. So yeah, thanks to all those people. Also, I just want to say congrats to Billy Monger for actually winning this race. Kind of lucked out with pitting early and getting on wets before everyone else did, but at the same time, he had dominating wet pace compared to everyone else who was on wet tires. So really, you can't fault him at all for the performance he did. Really impressive. If you'd like me to do these videos in any sort of different way, please let me know down in the comments. And if you like the video and you want to see more like this, please subscribe, hit the notification bell, like the video if you can. And I'm looking forward to doing another one soon. Have a good one.